It's no secret that Calgary is in the midst of some tough economic times. Our unemployment rate as a city is sitting at nearly 7% as thousands have lost their jobs over the past year. As with any city facing economic challenges, crime seems to have increased. We've seen the effects of gangs struggling for control of the drug trade and the often devastating results of the fentanyl scourge that has swept through Alberta. Addiction issues are largely to blame for the dramatic increase of property crimes we've seen reported. Car prowlings have risen to a rate not seen since recording began 20 years ago, and an alarming amount of gun violence in our city made the headlines this past year. We've seen isolated crimes of hate and our fair share of violent crime as well. Today we explore what strategies exist for the Calgary Police Service to help keep Calgary what is by and large a safe and laudable city to call home. Hey Calgary, I'm Kevin Chorney. This is Calgary Now. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're talking crime, and I'm joined by the Chief of Police, Roger Chaffin. Thank you, sir, so much for taking the time.
You bet.
And being here tonight. I know you've been busy doing a lot of this stuff lately. It is greatly appreciated. Now, you've got a unique perspective. You've been on the force for 30 years now. Over those 30 years, how has the city evolved and how has policing evolved to deal with a town like Calgary?
I've policed here for 30 years, but I've lived here for
your whole life.
54 years as well. So
right,
I've been certainly seeing Calgary emerge as a small city into what it is today. And the big city that Calgary is today brings with it lots of challenges. It's still, interesting enough, is a very vibrant city. It's a safe city to live in. Yeah. When you travel to other cities in the world, you do really get to appreciate just how safe Calgary is. But it certainly has brought with it some new challenges. And policing has changed. The policing has become way more complex over 30 years. Yeah. When I first started, it was a relatively simple job, and I hate to look back and say the good old days, but those days of policing are gone. The complexities are there with us, as every big city in North America faces, and it's a great challenge for us.
Robberies are up. Gun violence is clearly up. Property crime's way up. What's going on in Calgary right now?
We look very hard at attribution because we're trying to always make sure that our strategies are addressed at the core problems. Yeah. The crime problems you see, like house break-and enters and shop break-and enters, auto thefts, roll job robberies, these things are all on the upswing in Calgary. And I think when we look at attribution, we look very closely at the presence of new drugs in the city. Yeah. Our analysis will tell us that those crimes are directly related to the increasing presence of drugs like methamphetamine, fentanyl, heroin, and to some extent cocaine, although cocaine we see a little bit on the downswing right now.
So mostly opiates though, addiction issues, things that have been around for a long time.
Opiates, but methamphetamine as well. I'd say the opiates like fentanyl get a lot of notoriety right now, and rightfully so, because of the immediate death associated with the use of it and the hugely addictive power. Methamphetamine is also in that piece as not an opiate, but having a real dramatic effect on the behavior of people. Violent, radical, sort of erratic behavior that goes on with a methamphetamine addiction. And the real root problem at this end of the day for either drug, whatever it is the level of addictions. Those addictions are the issue at play. Mm-hmm.
Is Calgary a hub for methamphetamine manufacture, per se?
I wouldn't say manufacturing, although we keep sourcing it out. I mean, I think methamphetamine is relatively cheap because it can be locally manufactured, whether it be in British Columbia or in Alberta or in the US. The fact that it can be relatively locally made and transported makes it a viable drug, and its high addiction levels make it popular. As once you get into it and once you get addicted, it's not a choice anymore, it's something you must have.
It's cheap, it's easy to get, quick to make. Is government doing enough to really curb the manufacture in itself? To limit some access to these different ingredients that are utilized to manufacture methamphetamine?
Well, I think we do as much as we can possibly do to deal with the precursor elements, find the labs, and put our enforcement strategies around dealing with the sources. Again, the real problem though gets to be, as long as there's an addicted community out there, there will be the drugs will show up. Yeah. As long as people demand that drug and have to have it, there's a profit to be made by it. There's a market that will be there. Our real challenge is dealing with addictions and making sure that at a government level, as we work with our partners, that we have enough addiction services in the city.
Is it fair to assume that with the economic climate in Calgary, we're seeing a spike in drug use, in addiction issues?
Well, it certainly has a relationship. Yeah. We see downturns in the economy, see some hopelessness in the community. You have some different things that happen as people start losing their jobs. Are the drugs directly attributable to the economics? That's hard to say, but you can certainly see the relationship.
Yeah. We saw a remarkable increase in shooting-related homicides from 2014 to 2015. Is this attributed almost exclusively to gangs involved in the drug trade?
Not exclusively, but an important feature in why the rate is as high as it's been. Our numbers of homicides this year were probably as high as anywhere in Canada, and that there is a feature of gang problem inside there. We see violent gun activity, violent activity amongst gangs, and the random chaoticness of it that has spiked our rates for sure, but there are other features at play with our homicides too.
It's important to note that most, not that it makes it right by any stretch of the imagination, but most victims of gang violence are gangsters themselves.
Yeah, but you know what? We've seen this in our past in the city before, where innocent people get picked up on these issues. It's not like our gang members are trained shooters. It's not like they have policies or rules to follow, where and when they will shoot and how they will shoot. The randomness of what they do and the ability for a bullet to find innocent people is remarkable, and even one person getting picked up on that is one person too many.
I guess the reason I mentioned is that I hate to see people sway towards fear. You know, I think Calgary is ultimately, like you mentioned earlier, it is a very safe city to live in.
It's a safe city, but it's a big city, and I think you're right. Our message has never been about be afraid. Our message has been about be aware. You know, we work very closely with the community and making sure that either through our mayor and council or through our commission and our citizens, make sure we're doing the kind of policing that keeps public safety and the perception of safety very high. But we want people to be aware, and we want to be able to answer their questions when they start having concerns. When you see a shooting in a residential neighborhood, the community has concerns. We have to be able to talk to the community about what's going on and make sure we're doing things that help ensure them that safety is still our #1 priority.
And it's a shared responsibility. If you're living in a community, you want that community to remain safe. I think it's important to communicate.
That's the secret of Calgary. Honestly, the safety in Calgary over the years has really fallen down specifically to the relationship the community has with police and the fact that we work together, that they'll talk to us, that community groups will present themselves to us and we can work on solutions together. You simply, and many of these problems, are not going to be able to arrest your way through these problems without the assistance of the community. You need the real-time information from them as well.
I think it makes a lot of sense, yeah. We're going to jump to our quick rant pack break, folks. Stay with us.
Find out about these crime statistics that have come out recently, just with the rise in so many different types of crime. I think it's quite troubling. I've always thought of Calgary as a fairly peaceful city, but what this does do is highlight these issues so that we can, bring these things to the forefront and start discussing them constructively rather than pretending that they're not an issue. I think it's sad that these things are happening as rapidly as they are, and we definitely need to start talking about them more and pretending that they're happening behind closed doors, because obviously it is happening behind closed doors, but your neighbors can hear you.
Sounds like, Jay, essentially echoing what we just talked about, the importance of communication from the community to police. In the past, I'm not necessarily sure that was always the case in Calgary. I don't know if it's been language barriers or what the cause might be. What's changed? It seems as though that there is a bit of a fostering of a healthy stewardship amongst community and police. It's growing. At least it's headed in the right direction, in my opinion. Am I off the mark, or is that true?
No, we have some of the most remarkable community outreach programs. I think that it would probably the envy of most cities in North America, the kind of things that we're able to do with the community. It is a secret really to long-term sustainable public safety, is helping people with kids, helping young families, making sure we're helping aiding the sort of civil behaviors that we'd like to see people develop over longer periods of time. Our work with our schools is remarkable. Our work with the healthcare system in certain instances is remarkable. I think it's really the secret of policing and community life in Calgary. But what Jay talked about particularly is this idea that it's visible to people now. That's the world we live in, that information flows very quickly, and we can't hide that these things don't affect people. When he talks about the fact they're able to see this crime now, you may never see a gang member. And you likely in a big city like this will never be involved in one of these events, but these things that he's talking about are what people see. They see the house breaking enters, they feel the shop breaking enters, their cars that are being stolen. These things are directly attributable to the presence of drugs, and the community sees it, and as an overarching community, we need to deal with these things. This is where the bigger part of the community gets involved. If you've got a big addict community, then get in front of this thing. Now, you can't arrest addicts and stop them from being addicts. We need the social service folks, we need Alberta Health, we have these task force of people that need to get in front of this problem, to get in front of it now. We don't want entrenched addict communities in this city that will always bring this crime with them. If you're addicted, you will do anything for that next
I think we've
drug.
all, at one point or another in our lives, probably known an addict, and that's a very true statement. Addicts will do anything to get that next fix. It sounds like then you're obviously a proponent of rehabilitation for, I guess, addict-related crimes, as opposed to punitive action.
Well, I'm more of an advocate of a comprehensive strategy. There are reasons why people need to be arrested, and that's a strategy, but you simply will not arrest your way through addiction problems. You need to have proper remediations, you need to have proper supports in the community and lifestyles that will help these people move away from an addict lifestyle. The longer they have to wait for beds, the longer that treatment's not available for them, the more entrenched their addictions become and the more difficult it becomes to help them. And while they're in trouble, they will commit crimes.
Do we have enough government money geared towards the treatment of addicts?
Well, no, there's never enough money. And that's a simple answer. But I think in theory, it's not about is there enough money, is are we doing the right things together? Are we actually, are all these government groups working well enough together to create simple strategies and sustain these strategies? And I think that's our big test we've done over the years, and what we continue to do even as of today is work together across ministries, across different bureaus of government to make sure we're all focused on these issues. So that
Unified front.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Yep.
We saw nearly 100 shootings last year. Where are all these guns coming from?
Well, I mean, that's the automatic assumption is all these guns are coming up from the U.S. border. But as we look at them, as our data will tell us, that's where some of the guns have come from. They've come across from the U.S., but there's a lot of guns that have come from other areas in Canada. They've come from house break-in enters. People haven't stored their guns properly or been targeted with thefts. Right. And there's sort of a criminal element of weapons that are moving around. We've seized more guns this year than we've seized in years, and yet they still keep coming. So the supply is certainly out there. It really sort of harkens the demand for people to secure their weapons. If they own weapons, to secure them. If they're unsecure and people know they're there, there's a good chance someone's going to come try to take them. So.
I guess what's happening, like you mentioned, a lot of break-in enters. Weapons are taken, serial numbers are filed, it's untraceable. They're selling on the black market for quite a lot of money. So the motivation is obviously there. I mean, how do we, I guess, is the message getting out to gun owners, like, responsibility is key?
Well, that is the key. Responsible gun ownership. It's not. I'm not here to promote don't own weapons, but own them responsibly. If you're going to own them, secure them properly, follow all your safety precautions, and make sure they're not available for theft. If you have proper storage or safes in your house, that helps a lot. And the more responsible gun owners can be, the better off the whole community is in the long run. You don't want your weapon floating around out there for some bad guy to use to kill
somebody. No, I don't know how you'd be able to sleep at night. Right. 2008, 2009 was a recession period for our city. It also happens to be when we saw really the height of public gang violence. Fast forward 2015, 2016, we've got this slumping economy yet again. Is there a correlation between a downturn economy and gang violence?
Well, there's probably is a relationship there a little bit as the demand for drugs grow and then the violence around the drug trade grows and things. I don't know, I would say it's directly attributable to that though. I mean, the gang problems don't pop up that quickly. They tend to evolve over time, and small acts of violence and groups start to dislike each other with some passion, and those things start to evolve where little acts occur, retaliations for acts occur, then retaliations get more dramatic. So I would say these problems typically take a year or two to really sort of to mature, and this is what we're experiencing right now.
Is this a similar, I guess, gang climate that we saw in 2008, 2009 with the FOB and the FOB killers, where it was, essentially unorganized groups of thugs, I guess, is sort of how it was at least presented to the public at that time? Or have things shifted? Is this more akin to a sophisticated organized crime group these days?
I'd say it has some similarities to the FOB and the FK days. It has some, but the players are all completely different. The chaoticness of it is similar to the FOB and FK days. How do you use your intelligence apparatus to predict what's going to happen, who are going to be the next victims, who are your threat actors out there? So we learned a lot from those FOB and FK days. We've redesigned the service to be able to respond better. I think what we've done now is really taken those lessons and applied them to this group and put a lot of effort to make sure, both with overt pressure and covert resources and strong investigations, make sure we're targeting the right people. Because in a big group of gang members, not everybody has the capacity to kill. There's only a few of them that really have that really big capacity, and making sure those people are targeted, the people that are most violent of them are in jail, is our goal. Get those people dealt with and bring this risk down to a level we can manage better. But when the risks are high and it's chaotic like it has been in the city, that's when it gets problematic, is how do we predict what's about to
Yeah,
happen.
of course, of course. We're going to jump to another rant pack break, folks. Stay with us.